Welcome. I'm your host, Malcolm Gallagher. From our BizVision studios in the UK, you're watching across the world the BVTV Conscious Matters channel. Now, this may be a bit selfish, but I get a double treat with today's guest. I get to talk about a conscious matter which is close to our heart here at BizVision, and I get to visit one of my favorite countries in the world, Italy. Okay, that was a bit selfish, but I do have a real treat for you. My guest is truly committed to helping women in business, especially in leadership. She's been through it. Well, we call it the mill here in the UK, of not being acknowledged because of her gender. Quite rightly, she believes that the business world would be a better place if we had greater equality of opportunity. So let's say Buon pomeriggio, or is it Buona sera? Anyways, welcome to Transformational Leadership Coach, Rene Murata. Welcome, Rene.
Thank you, Malcolm. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, excellent. And it's a challenging time at the moment with communications because we've all had bad weather and everything. So viewers and listeners, if you get a little bit of a drop now and then, don't worry, Rene's, I can see her on screen. She'll be back with me soon. Right. Rene, I'm delighted that you're kindly guesting on the BVT Conscious Matters show. We're very committed here to the whole gender agenda, opportunity and challenge. Now, in this BVTV talk, I'll be chatting to Rene in 3 parts. First part, I'll ask her why women are so often overlooked in leadership. In part 2, I'll ask her what is feminine leadership businesses? What are they? In part 3, I'm asking Rene to really get down to telling us how having women in leadership roles can help a business become an authentic, conscious business. Rene, before we get into our 3-part talk, can you please briefly introduce yourself to my viewers and listeners? Who is Rene Murata? What drives you and what makes you jump out of bed in the morning, apart from some Italian opera singer practicing his scales in the morning?
Well, honestly, it's helping others. And it really is just as simple as that. So when I was first out of college, I was fortunate enough to have had a great boss who recognized and saw me and my value. But that didn't last long as we moved from one place to another. And then everyone that I worked for from then on, men and women, treated me as though I didn't have a brain in my head. Men were patronizing. The women were either jealous of my intelligence or threatened, or, just didn't see the value in bringing other women up. And so I really wanted to work with people on an equal footing, and I wanted to help others be safe. That's where my other company comes from, and build my business in a way that suited me as a strong, intelligent woman, and then support other women in that endeavor. So that's why.
Excellent. Yeah. Rene, let's kick off our talk with part 1. It's a simple question, but I guess a lot behind it. Why are women so often overlooked in leadership? Is it changing? And if so, what's driving change?
Well, Malcolm, it's a simple and yet not so simple question, right? So there are a lot of things, and there's a lot of research about it. Somewhere along the way, about 2,000 years ago, people decided that men were somehow better leaders. And so we have the patriarchal society set up now. Women have been taught in school to be silent, in church, wherever they are. They don't really know how to use their voice to speak up for what they want, need, or require. And sometimes in subtle ways, and other times not so subtle ways, as was the case for me. I had both. In fact, Sheryl Sandberg tells a really interesting story in her book where she gave a talk, and afterwards a woman came into her office and said that she had learned a very powerful lesson, and it was to keep her hand up, because Sheryl had said, no more questions. Then she took 3, but all the women put their hand down because that's what they were told to do, right? So the other thing is, like, if women are given a shot at sitting at the table, equal footing with men, they can be harshly judged by men and women. It's kind of a double-edged sword. We have double standards. If we are assertive, then people treat us as though we're aggressive. If we're not, then of course we don't have anything to answer to. So I could go on and on. There's a lot of history, a lot of research about it, but I really won't. What I'll say is that women want to be in leadership, and a lot of women know that they can, that they're capable of it. They feel called to it, but there's so much fear about how this double-edged sword is going to treat them, or they may not really quite know how to get into the leadership role. So they have to start learning a new way of talking to themselves. They have to learn a new way of talking to others. There's a lot of, they have to just really start shifting their energy and setting boundaries. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. Okay.
Yeah.
I first, let me kind of touch on some of the language that I use when I'm talking with folks. I refer to distorted energy and divine energy, and distorted masculine and feminine energy, and just divine masculine and feminine. And we all use those kinds of energies. The day that you snap at somebody, that's a distorted energy. The day that you stop and have compassion for somebody, that's divine energy. Or you could say the negative or the positive aspects of masculine and feminine. So for many years, I referred to myself, and others referred to me, as being aggressive, because that's kind of how I saw my need. In order for me to be a leader, I had to be aggressive in a man's world, right? I'm math, science, gas, oil, and they're all predominantly male environments. So for a long time, that's what I thought I had to do, is be aggressive. And then one day I realized that, first of all, it didn't feel good. I was kind of heading towards burnout. And so a simple shifting from aggressive to assertive made it easier for me to be in alignment with who I am. And when I did that, then it allowed me to become a better leader for my team and the people around me. So that's why women aren't in leadership. They haven't quite learned how to shift that into a way, that energy into a way that can really drive them forward, which is easy to do once they know how. Is it changing? Yes, slowly. And I think it's kind of picking up some speed now. What's driving the change? Men and women who are disturbed by the recent news, and they recognize the only way really to bring about change is to bring women into the center of the conversation. And because women really are nurturers, that's who we are by nature, right? We're nurturers. And so people that really choose to live consciously are the people that are helping to drive that change.
Yeah. And I find it amazing that business leaders don't bring on women when most of their customers are women. It's nonsensical, isn't it?
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah. But it's that old hierarchical thing that you were chatting about beforehand, tradition. I think it's changing, but it's not changing fast enough. In London, it's still only 5% of venture capital goes to women entrepreneurs. In Los Angeles, it's now moved up to 15%, but that's still far too low, isn't it?
It's very, yeah. It really, and especially because women are starting more businesses than men.
Yes.
Women are starting more businesses than men, and they get a lesser percentage, less than 20%. Like you said, Los Angeles is 15, right? So, and it's not just venture capital, it's loans, it's any kind of funding. And yet women are more likely to be starting a business than a man.
Yeah. I do admit it is changing, and we've been in Atlanta, Georgia recently, where a group of investors have got together, and they're looking to invest in women entrepreneurs because they see that it's more secure, and it's they've got that total conscious agenda with them. Rene, before we move to part 2, I'd like to remind viewers and listeners of your website URL, which is, as you can see everybody on the screen, but let me read it out for listeners. It's Rene, R-E-N-E, Murata, M-U-R-A-T-A. That's R-E-N-E-M-U-R-A-T-A renemurata.com, renemurata.com. Ready, time for part 2. Again, another simple question, but lots to talk about. What is feminine leadership? I don't mean token feminine leadership that some companies seem to practice, but authentic feminine leadership.
That's a really good question. It's one that I have been practicing and moving into for the last 15, 20 years now. Feminine leadership, my definition, I actually have 2 definitions, but I'll start with the first one, is really someone who leads compassionately. So someone who, coming from that divine balanced, embraces both the masculine and the feminine energy that lives within each of us, and then they move that forward into a compassionate kind of living. It's leadership is really about connection and empathy. It's about collaboration and compassion. And when you lead from that place, you see another person as a whole person, right? And by that, I really mean that you strip away all the labels. And there are a lot of labels out there right now, as you and I both know. And a lot of projections, and ugly beliefs about somebody who is different than us. And so when you strip all of that away, you can see that other person standing in front of you as human, period, right? To be able to do that does require some work. You have to really be willing to work on yourself. You have to get in touch with your past traumas and deal with them, your past hurts and prejudices, any of that sort of thing. So feminine leadership is really compassion. It's that soft skill that and soft, when I say soft skills, right, it's not so easy or so soft. When you have to deal with your trauma, it's not fun. But when you can relate to people in an authentic, vulnerable, real way, by bringing in that compassion, it allows you to work with people. And so feminine leadership, compassionate leadership allows you to work with people of different colors, different religions, different understandings, different backgrounds. My very first job out of college was really interesting because I was the only woman in the room, and I was I was a research assistant for the electrical engineer. And I had 2 electrical engineers, a software engineer, a mechanical engineer, and the operations guy. And they couldn't speak to each other. It was really interesting. They all spoke different languages, right? But because of my soft skills and my ability to really hear what was underneath everything and to strip away all the labels, I became a facilitator and, talked to everybody. And it was like, okay, so what did you say? Okay, here, this is what he said. So it was really an interesting experience. And it allowed me to be able to recognize that they had so much prejudice or belief systems around what the other person did that they couldn't even see past that, even though they were on the same team, right? Now, having said that, so that's my first definition, right, is the compassionate leadership. My second one really is when somebody wants me to come in and teach feminine leadership, what they're really asking me to do is teach women how to lead. And when that occurs, the first thing I do is really help women get in touch with who they are, with their feelings, with their past traumas, as I said, and really because they've been told that they're not allowed to and that it's not good for business, which is really interesting to me because the more women acknowledge their feelings, the more women use their feelings and emotions, as long as they are managed and not controlled, managed, then they can connect. They're compassionate. They can really drive things forward. They see people in a different way. And there's a lot of research out there that shows that women-led companies have more collaboration. They have higher morale. They have it's really about combining the heart with structure. So that's the other definition of feminine leadership. Heart with structure.
Do you think, though, some traditional, let's say, white male leaders are frightened of feminine leadership because they don't understand it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because they've seen women in the distorted masculine energy who is either, very aggressive or, we say, put on the man suit, so to speak,
Right.
or they see the woman who cries, that all the time in tears and she can't control her emotions and, so doesn't really know how to handle that. And
Mm.
so I think that there's a lot of that. And I think too that when you start seeing a person compassionately, like as I mentioned earlier, it takes work and it takes effort to see another person from a whole perspective, right? And to acknowledge that they're different. And I think there's so much patriarchal, and men have been in dominant, we've been in control for so long that it's almost hard for a lot of men to step into that compassion and acknowledge it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
when you start talking about feminine leadership and you start referring to, "Ooh, I might have to do that," I think there's a fear that they might have to give up something,
Mm.
and they don't really have to give up anything other
Yeah.
than the walls built around their hearts.
I'm with you, right? I mean, when I was looking through your website at renemurata.com, I saw lots of people who said how much better they were personally after they'd spent time with you. It almost seems like we need to be getting the male leaders to get some coaching as well to be able to work together within feminine leadership. Do you think?
Oh yeah. So I feel like the men that I work with, when I'm brought in from a company perspective, right? A lot of times they want me to teach women how to lead. But the other thing that happens is that men also are wanting to know how to speak to women in leadership, because we do speak differently. We are relational creatures. We are all about connections, whereas a man tends to be more like this. So I'll give an example of like having to fire someone. Let's say you have to downsize a company. There's women tend to look at a whole picture a little bit more, whereas a man tends to look at the bottom dollar. And I'm generalizing, right?
Yeah,
Of
I know.
course,
Yeah.
but women tend to look at the whole picture and they tend to see things a little bit different. So
Sensible.
makes for
Yes.
an interesting time.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there, and I have to say to you in my coaching, when I go into a boardroom and it's full of male white cloned people sitting there, like, oh no. But when I go in and there's a real nice mix, then there's a vibrancy about that business. They want to learn, they want to grow, they want to achieve. Yeah. Okay, let's move to part 3 now. And this is what we're really about at Conscious Matters, creating the authentic conscious business. So can I really get down with you now to telling us how women in leadership roles can help a business become, and I'll use that phrase again, an authentic conscious business?
So Malcolm, as I mentioned, women are relational creatures, right? So we really build relationships. We really are about connection. We really are about coming from the heart. Not that isn't true for men. There are men that are that way as well. It's just that by nature, that's how we are. Women are more empathic, sympathetic, collaborative, right? It's how we are. Think of the tribal, 2000 plus years ago, men went out and hunted, women stayed in the village and they managed everything, right? So we tend to look at a whole situation, and even when it comes to tough decisions, like when I said, for example, downsizing a company, I've had to be in a position where I had to make a tough decision between a man and a woman, right? And so I think a lot of times people tend to think, well, the man, even if he has higher numbers, they're going to keep the man. They're going to let the woman go. But then you have to look at the whole picture. The man might have 2 clients that happen to be great clients. They gave him those clients. They groomed him for those 2 clients. The woman was never given that opportunity, but she has a whole lot more clients. They love her. If she was given that opportunity, maybe she would have gotten there. So if you look at the whole picture, is it better to keep the man or the woman? Now, it's interesting. In December of 2020, in the United States, there were 156,000 jobs lost by women. There were 16,000 jobs gained by men. So, what does that tell you? For me, it tells me that men or women acting like men were the decision makers, right? They just flat said, okay, we're going to cut the women, because the women haven't been groomed. They haven't been shown. They are less likely to speak up. They are less likely to say, hey, well, wait a minute. I wasn't given that opportunity. If you give it to me, I'd run with it. They're less likely to be risk takers. So, in an era where things are kind of chaotic, risk is one of those really kind of weird things. That risk can either drive a company straight up or it can drive it straight down. So, there's a lot of evidence that women are more likely to lose a job. They're more likely to not get the promotion. There's just a lot of different things there, right? But as I also mentioned, there's a lot of evidence that shows companies that have a higher percentage of women in leadership roles, they have a more solid bottom dollar, right? Because of that collaboration. They're more creative. They feed off of each other. They're less likely to stomp on somebody if somebody has a creative idea. There's a higher morale. It's a safer environment. There's more flexibility. There's more, when you have women that are in their divine energy, that are leading from a compassionate place, that are from a balanced place, there's a little bit of vulnerability. There's a little bit of flexibility. So here's another example from recent for me. I had an employee who, he's been very, very sick. So there's, so what do you do? A business can say, okay, you can go on medical leave. Okay, well, really, do I want to do that? Or do I want to just say, hey, how about you work fewer hours? Because he felt like he could work about 20 hours a week, right? So fine. It's an easy fee. It's an easy flex point, right? Rather than getting rid of him or whatever. So I think women tend to be more that way in general. So having women in leadership roles, like I said, they've done a lot of studies. They can prove that it works, right? It just
Brilliant.
works.
Yeah. Sadly, I've got to say arrivederci to Italy, but some say world of business has moved forward 10 years in the last 10 months. The conscious business, and especially conscious leadership, are now high on the agenda of those companies who want to thrive. Equality will play a significant part. Grazie to Rene Murata.
Oh, thank you, Malcolm, for having me. It was a pleasure.